Hello, and welcome to Talk Relationship to Me, the show that explores some of the most important relationship topics. I'm Dr. Elana Hoffman. As a clinical psychologist, I focus on all things relationships. From dating to sex to long-term relationships to divorce, I cover it all. I use my professional lens as a psychologist as well as lived experience to cover these topics. Do you need to talk relationships? You're in the right place. On today's episode, I am joined by Regina DeMeo, who is a family attorney in DC and Maryland, and we are here to talk about some of the things that she sees as a lawyer and a mediator and some of the most important conversations to have if you are thinking about getting married and moving forward. And I'm so excited to have you. So thank you, Regina, so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Tell us a little bit about, what you do.
So I have been practicing family law for over 25 years now, and I do a lot of prenups, especially right now. It's like wedding season, so there's a lot of prenups that have to be reviewed. And I also am a mediator, so there's a lot of families in transition that need help, even if it's on the back end, like they've already gotten divorced and separated, but there's issues that come up, so I can do those. I do collaborative divorce, and as a last resort, I will go to court, and I still do litigate.
Yeah. I love that you said as a last resort. Yes. Can you say a little bit more about why it's a last resort?
Well, aside from the fact that it's very expensive, it's also really not the best way to handle your family disputes. You know, it takes a lot of time,
Yeah.
and it's really going to destroy any chance of goodwill going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. I talk about this all the time and I see it a lot where clients get so set on something that they want, an outcome that they want, from the, like you said, change in family structure, right? And whether it's a kid thing or a financial thing, and this is the thing, and it causes so much financial stress, of course, mental stress, emotional, psychological stress, and whatever that thing is, typically is not worth the stress that it causes for parents and the kids involved in that situation, because kids always feel it, even if you think you're hiding it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes in really high conflict cases, I actually am appointed by the court to represent children.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's, it must be so hard because you want the parents to make the decisions about their kids, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you don't want to decide something for a child you don't know. And yeah, yeah. So, I'm sure you talk to your clients about this, and I do too, about, keeping family decisions in the family as much as you can, right? And it
Right.
really is a last resort. And yeah. Yeah. And you also, in your spare time, read books about divorce and endorse them. So, Regina endorsed my book for divorced men. And so that was a really great collaboration to get your eyes on that. That was really helpful for me and really, important to get your perspective on. So, yeah.
No, it's fun.
And one of the things one of the things I talked about, and I'm sure you talk about a lot, is, when you are thinking about getting married, and like you said, it's prenup season, and I'm sure you do a lot of prenups, and I would love to just hear kind of, words of wisdom for people to think about when they're thinking about getting married and joining their finances and joining their lives and joining in a business partnership, which we so often don't think of marriage as, but that is what it is. You are deciding, hey, this is this person that I'm going to share the business of life with. And there are so many things to think about, whether it's a first marriage, a second, a third, fourth, fifth, whatever. I'm sure you see a lot of it. There are so many important financial things to think about.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very easy, right? It's like, tell me what you want to define as separate, and
Mhm.
I can put that in the agreement. Tell me what you want to define as your joint property. We'll put that in a provision. And then, super important, if there's going to be a claim for alimony, can we set some limitations so
Mhm.
it's not open-ended?
Mhm.
That's basically the three major categories, right? So the problem is, a lot of people have not good communication skills when it comes to money, or maybe one person doesn't even want to know about the finances. They just would prefer to just live in oblivious land, and that doesn't work, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you are creating a partnership, and just like if you and I were creating a business together, there would be a document that says, here's what the intention is going in, and should it fail, this is how we unravel it. It's the same
Yeah.
with a marriage.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So are there people that are there sort of what are the most common, I guess, things, disagreements or issues that people fall into when they come to you for prenups?
Very often, one person is surprised, and so they're very emotional about it. And especially if it's at the last minute, like the invitations have gone out, you're expecting 250 people in the next week and a half. That's really an unfair situation. So I always recommend to talk about it well in advance and try and
Mhm.
sign it at least 30 days in advance. That way, there's never going to be this claim that, oh my God, I had to sign this under duress. I didn't have the opportunity to talk to a lawyer, and I
Mhm.
didn't really know what I was signing.
Yeah, yeah. So when you say surprised, do you mean surprised by something that their partner wants to put in there, or surprised by it wanting
The
one in the
very
first place?
existence of a prenup,
The very
right?
existence of a prenup. Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying, okay, in 3 weeks before the wedding, someone says, "Hey, by the way, we should get this prenup."
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a tough surprise. But it is certainly indicative of conversations that might not be being had, important conversations about a financial future, right? If someone is surprised that their partner wants to put this in writing or wants to make an agreement, right? This means you haven't been having, I mean, this could mean you haven't been having conversations about money and what you earn and what you could earn and what you're going to do with it and all these things.
Right. And the other thing is, someone might have the expectation that, well, now we're getting married and everything is going to be joint,
Hmm.
right? And meanwhile, the other person is going in with the expectation that what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. So those are two very different visions for their future together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. How long would you say, it takes to, on average, to write up a prenup that people are kind of in agreement with and are okay moving forward?
Oh, it doesn't take me very long to draft it once they're in agreement on the terms. So we could be done in as little as a week,
Mhm.
right? If everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
But I think, part of it is I heard this when I was doing my mediation training and it stuck with me. Understanding is the enemy of conflict.
Yeah.
So if you understand why somebody wants their retirement to never be considered marital, or why their family business will never be something that is subject to division upon divorce, or their medical practice, which they have built, right? Like whatever the asset is that's trying to be excluded from marital property, right? It's just important to have a conversation, explain why you don't want this to be up for grabs later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see this in my couples work a lot. The really deep understanding when people can get to a place of deep understanding, which is sometimes difficult, for a lot of reasons. But, I mean, I see people, they've been married a long time. I see some people who are thinking about getting married and thinking about taking the next step. And they're like, what are things we should keep in mind? Sort of a more of a premarital approach.
Mhm.
And money is definitely one of the things that I talk about. But it's, when people are in conflict and they can get to a level of like, oh, this is why you care so much about XYZ, then they can really have compassion and empathy for them. But it's hard to get to that place. Sometimes the person themselves doesn't understand why it's so hard or why it's so important for them to keep XYZ, right? And so, if you have some self-aware people who can explain why this is important and you have an understanding partner, then I imagine that will, make an easy time for making a prenup and then also a marriage, having a marriage, right? If you can understand each other, take the time to do that, then that is, going to be very beneficial in terms of your marriage.
Right. And I mean, once we understand what the concern is on both sides, we can be creative with solutions that address all of those concerns, right? And to me, the best part is once we reach a compromise and they show a willingness to come together.
Hmm.
If they can't come together when things are good, it's really not a good
Totally.
indication of how things will happen later on.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, that makes a lot of sense. And leading up to a wedding, thinking about your future together, and you're kind of in this romantic period of, it's also stressful to plan a wedding, but if you were thinking about, if you're feeling connected and feeling really, in love, and you're looking forward to this, and then right during that time you can't come together on this, I imagine that would be indicative of future problems.
Yeah, I mean, if someone starts to give ultimatums, no, you either sign this or I'm not getting married. Like,
Yeah.
what does that say about that person going forward?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so do you recommend that everyone getting married have a prenup? I mean, have one that is different from the state that they already live in, which is already a prenup, basically, right? I mean,
I mean, I think it depends, right?
yeah.
If you're both similarly situated in terms of your professional lives and you both have about the same income and assets, then maybe you don't really need one.
Mhm.
Maybe you're okay with the law and how they define marital property,
Mhm.
right? To me, the big issue is that lately, especially with online dating, people meet from very different stages of life,
Yep.
very different professional backgrounds.
Yep.
And there could be someone that is incredibly well off matching with somebody that has nothing but debt.
Mhm.
So there's going to be huge disparities in the resources those two people have available to them, not only presently, but going forward. So you're really going to have those difficult money discussions about what's expected. Like if you're getting married, what will you be creating together? And what safety net will you be creating for that other person in the event somebody dies? Because that's also part of the prenup, right? What
Mhm.
happens in the event of death?
Right, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, so many people don't wanna think about it, right? Don't wanna think about somebody dying, getting divorced, right? So they kind of take a partner wanting to get a prenup as, like, we're gonna get divorced, right? And so I'm curious what you might say to someone with that mindset.
I've been saying this for a very long time. To me, we already know that there's a 50% chance that the marriage won't work out.
Yeah.
So, just like we all get into a car and we put our seatbelts on, not expecting the car to crash, your prenup is like a seatbelt,
Yeah.
right? And just in the event that something bad happens, because here's the reality, like things happen through life that will cause us to change, right? As I became a mother, there's a whole new side of me that came out, right?
Yep.
And when I got divorced and then became a single parent, I think there's a whole other side of me that so I have, now that I'm in my middle age, right? And so I keep changing and I hope we all keep changing for the better.
Mhm.
But sometimes people have a very terrible experience. It could be a health scare, it could be a complete loss of your job and income, whatever it is, right? So as we change, you hope to change with your partner and complement each other, but sometimes you go in the opposite direction.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we can't predict for that.
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. I think that marriage is so, touted as the end of something, right? Okay, this is like the end of the story, happy ever after, right?
Mhm.
Like you get married. And it really is the beginning, I mean, it's the beginning of something, and that's not talked about enough, this idea of, like, this is the beginning of a life with someone, and even if you've been together a long time, I mean, I do think that there's something different about being married, and so, you don't know what's gonna happen in the future, and you can't predict it, and it's kind of like, it's the beginning of things, but a lot of people are like, "Okay, great, I did it, I achieved it, that's the thing, and that's it," but it's not it, right? Lots of things, if you're lucky to, like, be alive in this world and live life, then lots of things are gonna happen, and yeah, you have to be able to figure that out, and I think it's even, sort of protective of the other person and of the relationship to just look at it in that way of, this is a reality, that could happen, and I want to make sure that we're both set up in the event that it does, and I think it can be a caring, loving, it can be seen as a caring, loving thing. Some people see it as like, I want to make sure to keep my stuff, I don't want to share anything with you. And maybe that might be a problem if that's sort of the motivation, because, that could be indicative of how they feel about sharing lots of other things, right?
Well, and that goes to the why, right? So sometimes I do see these very strict prenups, but if you ask them why they're doing this, it's because they already have kids from a first marriage and they feel very obligated to take care of those kids,
Mhm.
right? And so, okay, as long as you're all on the same page about that. And I've also seen some incredibly generous prenups where people say, I have all this money and I really want to make sure that this partner is taken care of. And so there's going to be like a minimum of, I've seen something like at least $2 million left to this person and beyond. It just
Yeah.
depends on how much wealth we're playing with.
Yeah.
But so I have seen some very generous ones, and I don't think people understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really nice point. It really can go the opposite of like, hey, I want to make sure this is for you, and this is really, you're taken care of in this way. And it can be a very loving thing. Yeah. Are there major differences that you see in terms of like first marriages or second marriages, when people are kind of coming together, blending a family, blending lives, later in life? I imagine that it would be different.
They are very different because usually young couples that don't have children yet and are planning to have kids together, so they're just trying to protect usually family money, right?
Mhm.
And any inheritance that they might get during the marriage. But they're still planning on building a life and some wealth together.
Mhm.
Second marriages, not so much.
Mhm.
Second marriages, usually, you're getting married for companionship,
Mhm.
right? And you don't want to pay any alimony whatsoever,
Mhm.
and you may not want to commingle your assets because you again want to leave them for those children you had from your first marriage.
Mhm.
So I'm okay with that too, as long as everyone's on board with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So your job is really just to meet people where they are and help them figure it out together, just like in a mediation, I imagine, right?
Exactly.
You don't want to decide, okay, you're going to give her a million, whatever it is. Like you don't want to be the decider there. You want to help them decide.
Right. And if they can't make a decision, I definitely refer them to mental health professionals to work that out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I wonder if any, couples kind of go through the prenup process and decide like, this isn't gonna work. Like this
We've
is
had some.
yeah, that is not surprising to me at all as a couples therapist, or people will talk about, their sort of their marriage is in crisis, and they'll refer to like, we couldn't, we got in so many fights about this prenup. And so, they'll talk about that, decades later. And so these are kind of, could be flags.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, that could be a positive thing, right? You decide like, okay, we're not on the same page here, and maybe we shouldn't get married.
And these days, that's fine,
Yeah,
right? Like, that's the beauty of
yeah,
like what
totally.
I've experienced over the last 25 years. Once upon a time, if you were gay, you couldn't get married at all. And now here we are. And
Yeah.
if you want to get married, and it doesn't matter, like whether you're same sex or not, right? You're treated equally.
Yeah.
So we've made a ton of progress. And these prenups are, I used to only do like a couple a year when I first started out. And now
Mhm.
it's very prevalent.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's good. Yeah, it's people need to talk about the things that are hard to talk about before they get married, and we're taught certain things not to talk about and certain things not to talk about, even on first dates, right? And it's like these are measures of compatibility. I mean, your example of people meeting online and having and being totally disparate in terms of, place where they are in life and finances and everything. I mean, these are can be indicators of incompatibilities or incompatibilities that are insurmountable. So it's not a it's a good thing to have all these options available so people can choose what kind of relationship they want, what kind of life they want.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And so on the other side, for people going through a divorce, what are the kinds of things that that you see that you kind of help them work through, or when you would refer to a therapist or a coach, or would you always, if there's a sticking point?
It's almost always,
Almost
yes.
always. Yeah.
Because not just because there's a sticking point, it's just that the legal process is very clean to me, right? And it could be very quick if they're all in agreement. But
Right.
there's a whole emotional side to divorce
Yeah.
that you have to unpackage.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to give you an example. I got someone divorced. We filed November 12th, right after Veterans Day, and that person was divorced by the end of December. That's one of the fastest divorces I've done,
Yeah.
right? But that person is still emotionally unpackaging everything that happened from that 10-year relationship,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I it's one of the first questions I ask clients, like, do you have a mental health professional? Do you need referrals? Have you looked online for, what's available in your insurance plan? They need to talk to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Do you find that people are resistant to it when they come,
No.
during, yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's hard to, some people I think are so emotionally overwhelmed sometimes during this time, where they think that things are so overwhelming, or it's going to be too expensive, or whatever it is, right? But yeah, it's a major life event, and why should you go through it alone? Like many other life, like getting married, you have a whole crew behind you, you have like things lined up for it, and you have different people taking care of different things. And, divorce is a similar thing, and certainly much more isolating, of course,
I
it's,
was going to say, because no one's bringing you divorce gifts.
yeah,
No one's bringing you meals and checking up on you.
yeah,
Like they're almost like, oh, I'm just going to
yeah,
wait till that person reaches out.
yeah, yeah,
And a lot of
yeah,
people don't want to reach out, right?
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
very isolating, and
Yeah.
you're going through so much loss. Like the idea of what you planned your future to be like
Yeah.
together, no longer being able to see your kids every night. It's a
Yeah.
hard adjustment for most parents, if
Yeah.
not all.
For sure.
Your identity as a wife, if you were members of a country club together and now you're losing half your friends. I mean, there's a lot to process.
Yeah.
And I'm not equipped to be dealing with the anger or the sadness, you know, the grief.
Yeah.
That is something. Thank God for COVID, right? Because there's a lot of telehealth options now that
For
6
sure.
years ago were not available. So I
Definitely.
really am lately not seeing any resistance to my request that they find a mental health professional.
That's great. Yeah, that's really great, because yeah, it is. And it is all those things. And also, as I always say, it's a real opportunity, to learn about yourself and to grow and to change. And I think that, it really can give people the space, if they take it, to understand what happened and to learn their patterns, so that hopefully it doesn't happen again. Of course it can, but it's a really important time for people to get the support they need, and then also, to think about moving forward after it's over. And it is changing, you're saying no one buys you divorce gifts. However, there's one, at least, divorce registry that I know of, because, which I think is, you don't think about, but I think is a great thing, because if you're rebuilding, right? Like when you're getting married, you're joining homes, you're joining lives, and sometimes you're bringing things, depending on where you are in your stage of life. But people, there's obviously wedding registries, people want to celebrate that and buy you gifts. When you're going through divorce, you are in some ways rebuilding.
Yeah.
And so you're moving to some people don't have anything, and so, like, divorce registries are starting to be a thing. I hope that they continue to be a thing, because, as you said, 50%, I think it might be even higher. So why are we not talking about something that happens to half or more of the population, right? It should not be this shameful thing. I think that the shame keeps people really stuck in unhappy relationships. And so, trying to change that stigma, I think, is, like, so important.
Oh, absolutely. But we have made a ton of progress on that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But I think it's interesting, to think about on the front end, the prenups and everything being, an indicator of how to have conversations about things that are difficult, and how to put things on the table, and, okay, how are we going to set up our lives? Of course things change, but, the ease of which you can come together on something like this, I'm sure, is predictive of how you deal with the inevitable hardships in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's so great, what you do to help people plan for their future and change their situations, if that happens, and how it's, to help people figure it out with themselves and stay hopefully out of the court system and to just keep the decisions in the family. And it's still a family, even though it might change the configuration of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's this book, Two Homes, One Childhood, right? Because you that child is still gonna have,
Yeah.
its parents just in two different locations.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a tragic thing that, oh gosh, these kids have two homes. Like maybe they have two amazing, great, peaceful, loving homes. And that is fine. Right. And it is certainly better than a marriage full of animosity and toxicity and all of these things that, your kids do see and feel and hear when they are in a home that is, n- not healthy or functional, in that
Yeah,
marriage.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's great to have, of course, lawyers, mediators available. So, can you tell everyone where to find you?
Right. So I'm a partner at Markham Law. We have an office in Bethesda. We have another office in DC, right in Glover Park. And best way to reach me is probably by email. So it's my initial R, last name DeMeo at markhamlegal.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for this great conversation about finances and prenups and divorce. And this has been Talk Relationship to Me, produced by Peach Island Productions. I'm Dr. Elana Hoffman. If you have a question about relationships, I'd love to hear from you. You can go to my website, dralanahoffman.com, and click contact, or find me on Instagram at dr.alanahoffman. You can find all the info you need, including more about today's episode with contact info in the show description. And if you have questions or comments about today's episode, I'd love to hear from you. You could inspire a podcast topic. So until next time, thank you all for listening.